Apple just made the iPhone bigger, not the screen, not the body, the camera bump, that thing on the back that you rest flat on a table and pretend isn't there. It's now 13.77 millimeters tall. That's up from 12.92 millimeters on the 17 Pro Max. The total thickness of the iPhone 18 Pro Max, including the camera plateau, is 11.54 versus 11.23 millimeters on the 17 Pro Max. I know, it's 0.85 millimeters. Calm down. But here's the thing. That 0.85 millimeters tells us something way more interesting than just a bigger bump. And that's what this video is actually about. Dummy units just dropped. These are non-functional prototypes made for design and size comparison, usually by manufacturing partners and accessory makers, not Apple itself. So they're not running iOS. You can't check your email on one. But what they can tell you is exactly what this phone is going to look and feel like in your hand months before Apple's September event. Vadim Yuryev from MaxTech says he stands by the accuracy of the iPhone 18 Pro dummies, claiming they should be spot on like the iPhone 17 Pro dummy units he received last year from the same source. So when these dummies show a bigger camera, thicker bump, and what looks like much more serious optics underneath, that's not a guess, that's a signal. And once you understand what it's a signal of, this phone starts to make a lot more sense. There's also one thing buried in these leaks that I genuinely didn't expect. We'll get there. Let's start with the obvious. The individual camera lenses are now 3% thicker, protruding nearly a full millimeter further than previous generations, and the diameter of each lens has expanded from 16.15 millimeters to 16.5 millimeters, reducing the empty space between the sensors. Now, I've seen people online reacting to this like Apple is out here making a chunky boy. And look, I get it. We've been trained to think thinner equals better. Samsung's been flattening camera bumps for 2 years. Honor made an entire identity out of it. But here's what the spec sheet crowd is missing. The bulk of the added heft stems from the optics. And while larger modules don't always guarantee larger sensors, they almost certainly point toward a more sophisticated optical stack. Translation: Apple isn't getting fat. Apple is making room for something. And what's that something? According to reliable Apple analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, the main rear camera, the 48 megapixel wide lens, will feature a variable aperture for the first time on an iPhone. Variable aperture on a phone. Let me explain why this is a bigger deal than it sounds. Right now, your iPhone camera has a fixed aperture. It's always 1.78 or f2.2 or whatever Apple locked it at. The phone's software then tries to compensate for whatever light conditions you're in computationally, and it's gotten incredible at that, like unreasonably good. But software has a ceiling. Physics doesn't lie to you. The aperture will dynamically adjust its opening diameter to control how much light enters the sensor, enabling more granular control over exposure and depth of field effects. So in a dark restaurant, open it up. In bright afternoon sunlight where everything's blowing out, close it down manually, actually manually. This is how professional cameras have worked for decades. And if this rumor is accurate, and Kuo plus multiple corroborating leakers are saying it is, this is the first time an iPhone gets real optical control rather than just computational tricks. That's not a spec, that's a paradigm shift in how iPhone photos are taken. Here's where I want to offer something I haven't seen other coverage connect directly. The thicker camera plateau might be hinting at the long-rumored variable aperture feature coming to iPhone 18 Pro, which might need the extra room. So the physical change you're looking at in the dummy units, it's not cosmetic. Samsung and a few Chinese brands have been trying to flatten their camera bumps. Apple seems comfortable moving the other way if it helps fit better camera hardware inside. That's a deliberate design philosophy. Apple isn't embarrassed by the camera bump. They're using it as a functional housing for hardware that simply cannot be miniaturized further without sacrificing optical quality. And honestly, respect. The telephoto lens in the iPhone 18 Pro models could also feature a larger aperture, allowing more light in poor lighting conditions. At least one of the Pro models could also feature a new 3-layer stacked image sensor developed by Samsung. The advanced image sensor would make the camera more responsive, and it could cut down on noise, increase dynamic range, and more. So you've got variable aperture on the main lens, larger aperture on the telephoto, and a potential new stacked sensor. This isn't one camera upgrade. This is 3 separate hardware changes happening at once in the same camera module. In the same camera bump, everyone's complaining about being 0.85 millimeter thicker. Kind of puts the "it's so thick now" crowd in perspective, doesn't it? Okay, let's talk about the front of this phone, because this part actually surprised me. Hands-on video of the iPhone 18 Pro Max dummy units reveals a 25% smaller dynamic island. 25% smaller. That is not incremental. That's the kind of change you notice immediately every single time you look at your phone. The dynamic island landed on the iPhone 14 Pro, and it genuinely was clever, a punch hole made functional, but it was also a lot. It took up real estate. It interrupted the display in a way that, after 2 years, became the kind of thing you just accepted. A 25% reduction means a meaningfully more immersive screen. And here's why it's getting smaller. Most likely, a smaller dynamic island with some Face ID components now moved under the glass, with a smaller pill cut out for the camera, remaining in a central position. So Apple isn't removing the dynamic island, they're shrinking it by moving the Face ID infrared sensor below the display, leaving only the camera in the pill. This might actually be the biggest front upgrade for Apple's Pro iPhone since the iPhone 14 Pro. And that's saying something. The 14 Pro was when the dynamic island was born. If the 18 Pro is when it starts to disappear, that's a full arc. Beginning and end of an era. I'll be honest, chip upgrades are hard to get excited about in video form. You can't hold a 2 nanometer process. You can't feel a chip architecture. But this year is different. The iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max will reportedly feature the Apple A20 Pro chipset, codenamed Borneo Ultra, built on TSMC's 2 nanometer process. The A20 Pro is rumored to deliver 15 to 30% better power efficiency than the A19 Pro. Now, the battery also gets a bump. The iPhone 18 Pro Max is looking at a 5,100 to 5,200 milliamp cell on eSIM models, marking Apple's largest battery ever, up from the iPhone 17 Pro Max's roughly 5,088 milliamp. Here's the insight that matters. It's not just the bigger battery. It's what happens when you combine a bigger battery with a chip that's 15 to 30% more efficient and a modem that's being built in-house for the second generation. Leaks claim this combination could deliver over 40 hours of mixed-use battery life, potentially 1.5 to 2 full days of heavy usage. For context, the iPhone 17 Pro Max, which already beats most Android flagships in endurance, hit around 18 hours in mixed-use tests. If these numbers hold, the 18 Pro Max doesn't just win the battery race, it laps the field. That is not a spec. That is your charger spending the night on the nightstand instead of plugged into your phone. Actually, let me leave that image there for a second. Okay, this is the one thing I didn't expect to be saying about this phone. Apple's C2 modem could add support for 5G satellite connectivity, allowing the iPhone 18 Pro models to offer full internet access over satellite, supplementing 5G networks for increased coverage when standard networks are unavailable. Not emergency SOS, not send a message in the middle of nowhere, actual internet over satellite. Apple is planning to allow third-party apps to access a satellite connection, plus Apple Maps, and the Photos app could work over satellite. And who's powering this? As of April 2026, Apple is teaming up with Amazon to provide this service after Amazon acquired Global Star, the previous provider of iPhone satellite connectivity. iPhones will now fall under Amazon Leo, Amazon Satellite Internet Network. So, Apple chips, Amazon satellites, full internet, no carrier needed. I want you to think about what that actually means for a second. You're on a road trip in rural Montana, no signal. You pull up your maps, stream a song, send a message from a satellite on your phone without a special device or a subscription to a different service. That's not a checkbox feature. That's the kind of thing that changes what reliable means for a smartphone. Real talk. Because I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but I have a 15 Pro Max or a 16. Do I actually need this? Here's my honest read. If these dummy units are anything to go by, the iPhone 18 Pro series looks like a familiar update where the biggest visible change sits at the back. For anyone already on a recent Pro iPhone, that alone may not feel like enough, but older iPhone users might find the overall refinement more worthwhile. I'd frame it this way. If your current phone still takes good photos and lasts through the day, wait. The iPhone 19 is probably going to be when Apple pushes fully under display, Face ID, and a truly redesigned front. That's the jump. But if you're sitting on an iPhone 13, 14, maybe even 15, the gap between what you have and what the 18 Pro Max is bringing, the variable aperture, the 2nm chip, the satellite internet, the battery endurance, is genuinely enormous. Not upgrade season marketing, enormous. Actually enormous. Here's where I land. The iPhone 18 Pro Max isn't trying to be a revolution. It's trying to be undeniably, uncomplicatedly great at the things people actually use their phones for: photos, battery, connectivity. The camera bump isn't a design failure. It's a statement. We have better glass in here now, and we needed room for it. The smaller dynamic island is the first legitimate front-of-phone progress in years, and the satellite internet story is quietly the most important phone feature of 2026 that everyone is sleeping on. The iPhone 18 Pro Max could be slightly thicker and heavier, pushing over 240 grams, up from the iPhone 17 Pro Max's 233 grams. It's going to feel denser in your hand, and I actually think that's fine. A dense, capable phone beats a thin, compromised one every single time. We're still months out from the September launch. Things will change. Leaks will contradict other leaks. That one color option you wanted will probably get quietly dropped. But right now, the direction Apple is moving with this phone is genuinely the right one. And hey, am I the only one who's actually okay with the bigger camera bump if it means we're finally getting real optical control on an iPhone? Let me know in the comments, because I have a feeling this is going to be a divisive topic. Catch you next one. Peace.